Welcome to Customer Service Academy Radio with author and customer experience expert Tony Johnson. Tony will share his vision for successful customer service, leadership, and business excellence, and speak to some of the most impactful leaders in business today. And now, here's Tony Johnson.
Hello, everybody. Customer Service Academy is on the air. I'm Tony Johnson, your customer experience strategist and trainer. Today's episode coming to you courtesy of Ignite Your Service Training and Consulting and 4XI Global Consulting and Solutions. Truly better together. Folks, I've still got the big old course out there on customer experience leadership and how to lead your team. Head on over to igniteyourservice.com/learning and check out my 6 canons of customer service, a great place for you to start if you want to start really upping your game with both CX and employee experience. But we are so happy today to have Michael Hinshaw joining our show today. As you know, we love to talk to folks who are getting it done. Michael is the founder and president of Customer Experience and Employee Consultancy, M Corp CX, and has been recognized by over a dozen organizations as a top CX influencer. He is on a bunch of lists, folks. He is a teaching fellow at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, the co-author of a couple of books, Smart Customers, Stupid Companies, and a new book with Diane Majors, Experience Rules. Michael, so great to have you in the studio today.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Appreciate you having me and looking forward to our conversation.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So I always kick off with the same question. Inquiring minds want to know, but everybody has a different point of view. It's like having a favorite song genre. What does great customer experience mean to you, especially coming from the consultancy side? But it could be how you take care of your folks, could be you as a customer, consumer, and guest, or just what you're seeing in the market. But what does great experiences mean to you?
Yeah, it's relatively simple from my perspective. It's making it faster and easier for customers to accomplish their objectives when they're interacting with a company. Of course, customer experience as a phrase, it lives between people's ears, so it's pretty fungible and subjective. But customer experience management is the process that organizations can undertake to actually make it faster and easier for customers to accomplish their goals.
The thing I love about that, it's one of those things where if you say it really fast, right, it sounds so easy, but there's so much art and science behind such a thing.
Yeah, well, that's the old thing. I say this a lot. I said, it's straightforward, but it's not simple.
Yeah. There's a difference between being easy and simple, right? When you think about how organizations create a culture that drives customer centricity, how does that come to life? How can organizations do that? Because it has become a phrase that we're all hearing more and more. This idea of keeping customers at the center, this customer centricity. How can organizations do that?
Yeah, unsurprisingly, it's a multi-part answer, right? But the first thing, it's not always the first thing, but it is important that organizations have clarity what it means to them. What's your strategy and vision for being customer-centric? And different organizations can pursue that in different ways. What customer centricity is to one company might be different than for another. So you need to be clear on what it means. And you need to be able to communicate that in a way that is understandable to your people. You need to have alignment across the organization, what that means, and some accountability to deliver against it at what we call the WIFM level. What's in it for me? So your strategy and vision have to actually apply to the ways that your organization and that your people work, and that they're accountable to deliver against it in ways that you can essentially track. And the last piece of this, which of course isn't actually the last piece of this, but it's the incremental changes to shift organizational ways of thinking and working. Essentially, how do you help the organization translate that vision to action and actually shift culture? I say incremental purposefully because organizations that say, okay, we're going from this direction to that direction, have a really hard time doing that. But if you build on what's there, it makes that shift easier and more acceptable, because change is scary to people. So if you move them, a little bit at a time, it's just easier to get the organization working together.
So, a big part of that customer centricity too, as you kind of alluded to, is knowing where you want to go, knowing what you're trying to do, knowing what your customers want and need, so important. We've got a lot of folks who listen to the show who are on varying stages of their journey, from very mature CX organizations to small businesses. But if you were going to give that kind of first step to understand your customers and what they want and how to keep them in the middle of your thinking, what advice would you give business owners who are just starting down this path to understand their customers?
Yeah, that's a simplistic answer. It's actually not, this one isn't as complex as like trying to shift the entire org or take a big company and move it. It's understanding your customers. It's listening to them regularly and analyzing what you hear and then taking action based on that to improve experiences. It's remarkable to me how many organizations we still bump into that, do customer surveys on a regular basis, for example, or they record their call center scripts. They have all the social media information. They don't do anything with it, right? So it's like, as a customer, have you ever, filled out a form saying, I'm happy or I'm unhappy? And how often does a company get back to you and say, hey, thanks for that feedback. I hear you. We're going to do something about it. And the answer in my case is, I think never. So, right. And if you don't have that connection, if you don't know what your customers are thinking and kind of how they're feeling, it's really hard to improve the experiences that they have because you don't know what they want and you don't know what's working and what isn't working today.
There's a couple of writer downers in there. As you think about small organizations, immature CX organizations, those starting, they may not have a listening, methodology. They may not have a survey or anything yet because they're just getting into it. So they can't, they need to start there. But then you've got these big mature organizations who have a ton of customer listening, right? Tons of voice of the customer touch points. But then it's so sad, to your point, when it ends up in a desk drawer and they don't do anything with it. And it just seems like, what was the point of all of that?
Well, you mentioned at the top, one of the things I do is I teach teaching fellow at UC Berkeley. And the area I teach in is innovation entrepreneurship with a focus on, surprisingly, on customer experience. But we spend a lot of time with teams who are building ventures. And the goal of those ventures in many cases is to actually go out and get them funded. And whether it's bootstrapping or pitching to VCs, and continually these teams will come to me and colleagues and say, here's what we're doing. And the first question I ask is, that's fantastic, great idea. How many potential customers have you talked to? Oh, I talked to 3. Or, in business school, a surprising number of ventures are built around helping business school students or helping, right? Because that's what they know. But that's not necessarily the experience of all of those students. So you go out, you pressure test it. Steve Blank has a phrase, customer discovery. You talk to customers, and that doesn't have to be complex. I mean, you don't need to have a whole listening system in place. If your CEO gets on a phone and calls 20 customers a month and listens to them closely, I'll bet some things are going to change, and he or she will probably learn something in the process.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the reasons why I love working with small businesses, especially here where I live in Lakeland, Florida, Orlando, Tampa, because those that do a really great job, I've got a ton of clients who really get it done using this very simple SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, right, to get feedback. And they've trained the folks that go into, I've got a great friend of mine who's also a client who does home inspections. And he's trained himself and everybody on his team to ask a lot of questions as he's in with the homeowners. Yep. And then as they're going along, you just ask them questions about, hey, was there anything that was too hard today? Anything that you didn't understand? Anything we can do a better job explaining, or anything we took too long on in your mind? And he just kind of listens to what they have to say, jots it down, and he uses that to inform his decision making on how he goes forward with his home inspections. And it is the most grassroots listening system you've ever heard in your life, right? And the guy doesn't pay a nickel for it. It's all free, but it works like a charm, and he is busy like you would not believe.
Yeah, there's a statistic I heard a number of years ago. I don't know how true it is today, but I believe that the number was that less than a quarter of decisions made inside companies that affect customer experiences are made with any information about or from customers. There's an HBR article a number of years ago, but I read that, I was just stunned. Right. And be thinking about a small business owner, to succeed as a small business owner in particular, you really have to be close to your customers. You have to understand what the needs are, because everyone's got tons of competition. You don't have, the momentum of a huge organization that's been around for years behind you. But as we've both seen, big organizations that don't listen to customers and don't follow trends in the market can get hit pretty hard too.
Amen to that. So, I was nosing around as I LinkedIn stalked and got ready for our interview today. And, MCorp CX has launched some really great looking online, virtual, on demand, whatever we're calling them these days, that's kind of hip and cool programs. So as you've done that, what did you all learn about what's key to success with virtual training? Any tidbits or tips as you all were setting all this up? And by the way, folks, if you haven't gone over and visit the website, we're going to plug that later. It'll be down in the show notes, but it is worth a look. There's some good stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is it can't just be virtual, right? A lot of organizations, when they stand up training, it's like, okay, go take the standard training. It's like, I'm assuming in Florida, it's kind of like California. If you get a speeding ticket, you have the option of taking a driver's ed course online, or whatever that is, and then they'll expunge 1 or 2 tickets, if you do that. People treat e-learning similarly if it's mandated. Right? It's like, okay, when can I click to the next thing and let me just fill out the right answers? It needs to be part of a broader program. It can't just be here's e-learning. It has to be tied back to organizationally. What are we trying to accomplish? What's in it for you? How can this help you in your job make that shift? So e-learning is great because it democratizes and allows you to spread the training or the education and learning really across the organization. But if you do that without tying it back to what's in it for the individual and where the company's going, it's much less successful. I mean, you might deliver it, but is it actually going to drive change in the organization? What we've seen, probably not.
So the content has to be compelling. It has to be good and engaging to the extent that it can be virtually, but it has to be a part of a larger learning strategy.
Yes. Yep. It has to be part of a larger learning strategy, and it needs to be applicable to the individual in their role. At the very least, it needs to be something they can see how it applies to what they were trying to accomplish, in their day-to-day. If you have, I'll just use a bad example. If you have a big design thinking training, and we've seen, a lot of those in organizations, and you mandate everyone does this design thinking training, it's not bad. But if you're, an accountant in the back office, the first question you're going to ask is, how does this apply to me? I'm an accountant in the back office, and without that connective tissue, without making it relevant for them, it's not going to stick.
So we danced around this a little bit in one of our previous portions in conversation. How can systematically listening to customers drive business results? So I guess the big question is, we talked before about the fact that you should do it, but why should anybody care about having this intentional, systematic approach to customer listening?
Yeah. So you said, how can it drive business results? And my flip answer, which I'll give first, is how can it not? Right. But if you think about it from a business perspective, you do things as an organization to your customers, right? Like your friend who does home inspections, he's out there talking to customers. His team, they go in and they do a process. They inspect the home. They show up, they knock on the door, they maybe call in advance and confirm the appointment. Those are all things that the organization is doing. And as a result of those things, his customers are going to feel a certain way. They're going to respond emotionally, because experiences are emotional, right? They live between our ears. So as an emotional response, how does it make them feel? If he just shows up on a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. with no warning, they're not going to feel very good. But if it's an appointment for Saturday at 10 a.m. and they call Friday afternoon and say, hey, confirming the appointment, is 10 a.m. still good for you? It's going to leave a good feeling, right? Because the homeowner's going to say, oh, that's awesome. Actually, yeah, 10 a.m. is perfect. Or can you make it at 9:30? Because it turns out we got a hairdresser or whatever. So when you do things to customers, they respond by feeling certain ways. And when they feel certain ways, they do things. They behave different ways. Now I'm going to get a punchline in 1 second here. But you do things to customers, they feel something as a result of what you do, and they behave in ways that are either positive or negative for your business. And you can track that, by the way. So if you think about the example of a homeowner feeling great about the appointment, and then the overall experience is fantastic, they're going to go out, they're going to tell their friends how great it is. The next time they have to do a home inspection for whatever reason, they're going to call your friend. If it's a negative, then they're going to behave in ways that are detrimental to the business, detrimental to the value. They're going to not call again. They're going to tell their friends who are thinking about getting an inspection, don't go to Bob or whatever your friend's name is, right? So you can ladder those things up through listening in ways that allow you to connect what you're doing to those feelings, what your customers do, and tie it quantitatively back to business results.
I could not agree more, right? It's just one of those things where it seems like such a no-brainer. So earlier you talked a lot about the team. You talked about kind of getting the word out with the employees and with the team base. They're usually the face of most brands, teams, employees, that kind of thing. How can education around CX, training around CX, how can that help with the maturity of an organization with customer centricity? Make the case
Yeah.
for us, because it's one of those things where a lot of organizations may not put enough oomph behind getting the
Yeah.
word out, doing the training, getting the information to folks. How does
Yeah.
that help, and why should folks invest that time?
So, I mean, that goes back to the, making it real, whatever training and education you do. And we found that the most successful training and education activities combine e-learning with other types of learning, whether it's, applied learning with a team in your job, working with folks in your group to actually take what you've learned and do something with it. And you're right. It seems logical that if there's greater focus on training the organization, that there's going to be greater maturity as a customer centric business. But we actually did did a survey with the CXPA, which is the Customer Experience Professionals Association. It was a pretty in-depth research project, actually. A few months ago, I think we recently published, and it's available on our website. You just download a research report. But we were able to directly correlate or quantify the connection between investment in training and education around CX and greater customer centricity, greater maturity in that area. And our hypothesis going in was that many organizations spend a lot of time and energy training the executive suite, helping them better understand what the stuff means. And or they'll spend a lot of time and energy, those folks who actually design experiences or are responsible for customer experience in the organization. But they kind of miss the middle, right? You think about a distribution curve, the executives, not many executives over here, not many folks who are actually responsible for managing CX. But if you can't move the middle of the organization, if you can't help them understand where you're going, why it's important to them, it's going to be really hard to shift. And so all of which to say, this research shows that those organizations that put the most emphasis on training and education around CX are more customer-centric and have greater maturity across all the key levers of customer-centric capabilities.
So folks, you heard it here. Get the word out, get it out early, get it out often. And as I've said 100 times, everyone loves to make fun of middle managers. It is the punchline of many corporate jokes. But as someone who spent a lot of time in his career in middle management, they are some of the most important folks to win hearts and minds. If you want to translate executive ideas to frontline action, really take a hard look at what I would call a district manager or a mid-level manager and get the word out everywhere you can, because it is never a waste of time to do that. I promise you. So that, I think that's an amazing point. So this has been fantastic so far. And folks, if you are loving this, and I know that you are, make sure that you scroll on down, leave 5 stars, say something nice, share it with your friends. That's how we're going to keep Customer Service Academy one of the top podcasts for customer experience in the world. And thank you for that. So this has been great so far, but are you ready, Michael, for the lightning round?
Oh, all right. I'll let you know in a couple minutes.
All right. We'll see how it goes.
Go
5 quick questions, 5 quick thoughts to get to know you just a little bit better. What's your favorite hobby?
I think I have to say I have 3 of them. Outdoors, all mountain biking and skiing, snow skiing, water skiing.
Well, being out in California, you're not in a half bad place for all of that, right? You picked well there. How about brands that are given the best service right now, the best experiences? Could be a national, could be a local, but anybody getting it done for you that you're like, gosh, I can always count on them.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of ties back to my hobbies, right? It's REI. I'm not sure if REI is a national brand or not. I know that they have their presence in Colorado, Utah, and California, where I spend a lot of time doing this stuff outdoors. And REI is essentially, they're a retailer of outdoor-oriented clothing, products, services, everything from hiking to skiing, et cetera. But they actually do an amazing job connecting their in-store service and their digital service to the specific needs of their customers. And the people who work there, in different departments and groups, are serious practitioners. You're not going to find somebody in this. So my wife tells a story. In high school, she worked at a ski shop, and she sold skis did a really good job of it. But she'd never been skiing. She'd actually never seen the snow at that point. Had no idea what she was talking about. But she did a great job selling skis. And REI is kind of the reverse of that. Someone who sells skis, they actually ski. If you're doing backcountry skiing, they know all about backcountry skiing. Hiking, they got hikers. It's people who can relate to you as a customer and who can give you really good advice based on what your interests are. And so that's really why REI kind of jumps to mind as a brand that I admire for delivering great experiences and great service and doing so consistently.
And that's great, because when you also throw in that piece of knowledgeable employees along with good service and all of those other things, it's sort of a force to be reckoned with. So I do love folks who tell stories about knowledgeable team members. I think that's so important. How about your favorite food?
Is bourbon a food?
It could be. It is a food group in this household as well, Michael. So I really like the way you think. Someone called it liquid corn with water croutons or something, right? So it could be, but.
Yeah, I was joking. Said I like bourbon way too much to abuse it, because if I did, I'd have to stop. So,
well, I think we're going to go with bourbon being our favorite food group today. I love it. I love it. Are you binge watching anything fun right now? My wife and I just got done binge watching Yellowstone. Anything on your hit parade right now? I know you're an outdoors guy, but
yeah, I actually don't. I don't binge much on because I don't watch a lot of television. That being said, about 3 months ago, I decided to rewatch the James Bond, the Daniel Craig James Bond. And maybe it was beginning of summer, maybe more than 3 months ago. But I think I just finished Spectre, which I know for sure I just finished that. And I think that's number 4 or 5 in the series. I think I've got one more to go, which I'll probably do before the end of the year. So.
Well, that's fantastic. He is in the running for being my top James Bond, so bonus points there.
Yes.
And then final question, favorite vacation spot when you're doing all these outdoorsy things, your favorite place to go?
Yeah. Lake Tahoe.
Lake Tahoe. What a great choice. So, Michael, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing such great content, such great insights. How can people get in touch if they want to learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Michael Hinshaw. I'm pretty easy to find, and I do actively respond to my LinkedIn messages and connection requests and all that. So please reach out on LinkedIn. My email is mhinshaw, M as in Michael, last name HINSHAW at mcorp. That's mcorp.cx. And I love talking about this stuff. If you got any questions, anything else that you want to follow up on, please reach out to me. I'd be absolutely delighted to connect.
Great information. And folks, we will put that down in the show notes. You're going to be down there leaving 5 stars anyway, saying nice stuff about me and Michael. You're going to be down there anyway. Go ahead and grab it. I'll put a link to the website, to his LinkedIn and his email, all in the bottom of the show notes. But again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. It's been great, Tony.
And folks, remember, we are still in the middle of the Great Service Comeback. Thanks one more time to Michael for being on the show today. But remember, we are in the middle of the Great Service Comeback, and that is the chance to really win the field, not just on price, not just on value, but on experience and what you can bring to your guests, your customers, your consumers every single day. Because if you're busy competing on price, boy, that's a tough proposition. And remember, if you're looking for a little more inspiration on this, you can head over to Amazon.com and check out my book, Together We Serve. That's Together We Serve by Tony Johnson. You can get it on paperback, digital, and audio. But until next time, I've been Tony Johnson, your customer experience strategist and trainer, reminding you to keep your customers and your employees at the center of everything you do, because that's where the most amazing things are possible. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week.
This has been Customer Service Academy Radio with Tony Johnson. Tony is available to speak at your event, meeting, or workshop. Have a powerful customer-focused day.